The prototype has been keeping fans of Poppy Playtime restless for 3 years. Even at its first appearance, this mysterious entity raised a lot of questions, and it became clear from the start who the main villain was. We were shown the appearance of the prototype, but for now, this character still has a composite look. However, we missed some details that have already been revealed to us. We began learning about the prototype. Initially, it was just a large clawed hand, and from the very first chapter, this hand symbolized the evil in this place. In the second chapter, we actually saw this hand, and in the third chapter, it was slightly bigger. Plus, we found out that the prototype can talk, not in its own voice, but by imitating others. It can now form speech. In the first tape, where it spoke to the doctor, it seemed to still be learning how to talk, so the voices changed often, sometimes sounding mechanical and very defective. It was then, precisely because of this tape, that I suggested that someone named Ollie was calling us, but in reality, it was the prototype. First of all, we didn't know what it looked like or where it was located. Second, knowing the prototype's ability to mimic voices, we could conclude that it had memorized the voice of one of the orphans. Finally, in Chapter 4, it is confirmed that Ollie is the prototype, and in fact, Ollie never existed. All this time, it was the prototype speaking to us. But that's almost everything we know about its abilities and skills. This monster is very cunning, but let's go back to its appearance. In his child's drawing, Theodore, the same boy who would later become Catnap, drew it, and it seems that the prototype had never fully manifested in front of him, since Theodore only drew the hand. When the third chapter came out, we learned a bit more about its body structure. There were arts showing both the right and left hands, and it turns out that the right hand is the biggest. I would also recall one image on a VHS tape. In the background of the video, you can spot a human figure diagram, and interestingly, one of the arms is larger than the other. It seems like there is only one right hand, and indeed, the right one is the biggest. If we are truly seeing the prototype's diagram, it could look something like this: an ordinary person but with one long clawed hand. One hand could be shorter, or at that time it might still have been missing. So where are its big spider-like legs? They probably aren't exactly spider-like because there are 6 of them, but they're not shown in the diagram. And from what we can see, the prototype is really large. Just imagine the size of its legs. There are no legs shown in the diagram. Maybe that's because they hadn't been added yet, like the left hand, or perhaps the diagram doesn't even show the prototype at all. But now we know another important detail. It has huge crab-like legs, and it seems to be very massive as well. We can also imagine how, in the third chapter, Catnap, who had deep admiration and a strange form of reverence for the prototype, made the idol that was dedicated to it. He considered the prototype as something of a god or a savior, or perhaps even something along those lines. In this light, we could say that the idol is somehow a representation of the prototype itself, with only one significant difference. It lacks the legs. The idol is almost a perfect replica in every sense. It's got the large paw, everything is there, but the legs, for some reason, are completely missing. However, I wouldn't necessarily go as far as saying that this idol is an exact replica of the prototype in every single detail. It's more likely that Catnap simply copied the body shape of the prototype in his idol, but didn't truly capture its full appearance. I don't think the head of the prototype is some caterpillar-like creature that somehow consumed a human skeleton. Although, admittedly, some fans and animators imagine it like that, possibly because they believe the prototype's head to be just an ordinary skull, with the true nature of its face not having been revealed to us yet. Therefore, we only have a vague understanding of its body's general shape, just like we know what its legs might look like, even though we haven't actually seen the legs themselves in any form. And by the way, I would even dare to suggest that because of its specialized gripping claws, the prototype might be able to climb walls and ceilings with ease. The prototype seems capable of appearing in literally any location, whether above, below, or in places that defy all logic. It has this almost supernatural ability to get into spots where it seems an enormous machine shouldn't even be able to fit in. Just imagine it as a boss enemy. It could literally do anything. But this begs the question, why does it need all of this? Why is it acting the way it is? And what exactly is its goal with the uprising? What is its current state of mind? What is it doing now? And what could possibly be its long-term plan for all of this chaos and destruction? Figuring out the prototype's appearance isn't particularly hard, especially with all the details and hints being gradually revealed to us over time. However, trying to understand the deeper motivations behind the character's actions and intentions is much more challenging and requires much more thought. Let's begin by acknowledging that this entity is, after all, just a regular experiment 1006. But there's something different about it, something that sets it apart from the others. If we assume that every monster created in the facility had a specific purpose or function, it becomes clear that the prototype never really found its place. Despite being one of the first successful experiments, with its number being among the smallest, it seems that no one ever figured out what to actually do with it. It's almost as though the prototype was too special to simply be discarded, and that's why it was kept around. Perhaps it was its uniqueness that intrigued the doctor, who may have given it more attention and care than all the others in the facility. But the prototype is no mere lab experiment. It's capable of responding to the doctor and shows some level of self-awareness when it says it's actually happy to study humans. In that moment, it almost feels like the prototype is trolling the scientists and the doctor, acknowledging its own intellectual superiority. And in the end, that's exactly what happens. The prototype becomes more than just a subject of study. Throughout its existence, the prototype has been actively observing and analyzing the other monsters around it, perhaps trying to understand them or even learn from them in some way. There's also an interesting theory floating around that suggests the prototype might actually be more benevolent than we think. According to this theory, its ultimate goal could be to prevent the monsters within the company from escaping into the world, thus protecting humans from their potential dangers. If that's the case, the prototype might see itself as a protector rather than a destroyer. But then we have to ask, if its true purpose is to protect humanity, why would the Hour of Joy event be necessary? Isn't destroying the company, its infrastructure, and its employees ultimately counterproductive if its aim is to safeguard human life? There's a deep contradiction here, and it's this complexity that makes understanding the prototype's true motives all the more difficult. There's a feeling that it has a special connection to Poppy. It talks about some essence that she cannot understand, and apparently the doll is some missing element for the prototype. If we listen to the tape, the prototype is clearly nervous and in a hurry. The very tape where it talks to the doctor, the prototype seems to be busy with its own experiment, but it doesn't trust the doctor. If the doctor had gained access to the laboratory, it's unclear what would have happened afterward. Perhaps at that moment, the prototype was afraid the doctor might get information that could later be used against it. Or maybe there's something valuable in the laboratory that mustn't be given under someone else's control, as we hear on one of the last tapes. There's an interesting hint that Poppy's father is Elliot Ludwig. Her dad once ran this place, but clearly she speaks of him with affection, not about the mad Dr. Harley. Her father is actually the very Elliot Ludwig, who truly wanted to make the company better and came up with brilliant ideas. What exactly the prototype is doing right now is still completely unknown. In my opinion, as I've said before, it's busy with some grand personal experiment. Perhaps it wants to create its ideal body, but time is passing and it's clearly not working in its favor. What do you think the prototype is planning? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments.